The Warratyi discovery was made as part of a broader archaeological research project into the Aboriginal occupation of the Flinders Ranges in arid South Australia for my PhD. This was a partnership project with the traditional Aboriginal owners from the Flinders Ranges, the Adjamatna Traditional Lands Association. The main research question was to test the hypothesis that Aboriginal people had been living in the Flinders Ranges for more than 35,000 years ago. The rock shelter site was discovered in a remote part of the northern Flinders Ranges, in some gorges surrounded by rock art sites and semi-permanent springs. The site itself provided good shelter from the extremes of cold and heat that people might have experienced, and it gave people access to the surrounding gorges where they could easily hunt and gather for local food resources. Its geological structure was quite unique and rare, and this is why we think people were attracted to it, because it was quite significant.
G'day, I'm Peter Mitchell and I'm stuck down here under Emu Rock Shelter in the bed of a creek while Giles takes some pickies. He wants me to tell you all about the geology. Well, if you look across to the rock shelter over here, you'll see that the beds of quartzite have got a bit of a bend in them. They dip down to the south, all the way across, and they're almost horizontal in the middle as a bit of an arch feature. It's really what we'd call a small anticline or an upwards fold. Each bed of quartzite is separated by a finer grained bed of argillite, which is a metamorphosed mudstone. All of this stuff was laid down in a seafloor way back in the Precambrian about 600 million years ago. And then it got hardened up and pushed up into this folded shape, and after that it got pushed again from different directions, and cleavage is broken up all through it, giving lots and lots of fracture planes. The fine-grained sediments fracture much more closely than the quartzite does, and so in the tops of the arches, if the fine-grained sediments are at the top and they're all broken up, they tend to fall out and make a little rock cavern, and then the heavier, more solid quartzite beds make an arch which allow the cavern to stand there. And that's what we've got with the Emu Rock Shelter.
The excavation was carried out over a number of field seasons, with 2 trenches being dug to test the extent of human occupation across the shelter's floor. We sieved around 3 tonnes of soil and excavated around 3 cubic metres of sediment. As a result of this work, we recovered around 4,300 stone artefacts and 3 kilograms of bone material, as well as charcoal, ochre, eggshell and plant remains.
I'm Christine Coulthard, and I'm a trainee, and at the here is sieving stuff. What we do is bring the buckets of soil and put them on the sieve, and then it's shaken around, and then all the rough particles are on top. We then look through it and pick out the larger pieces of bones and artefacts, and then we put them in plastics.
You've been finding a fair bit, or?
Depends on what level it is, I think. And see how it goes from there.
The site provides evidence of the earliest known occupation of the Australian arid interior at 49,000 years ago. That's 10,000 years earlier than previously reported in Australia. This discovery pushes back Aboriginal occupation in the Flinders Ranges by over 30,000 years. It's one of the earliest human occupation sites in Australia, and it's the earliest human occupation for people in South Australia. The site also shows the earliest evidence of extinct Australian megafauna in association with human artefacts dated to over 46,000 years ago, and proving human interaction with these animals at this early time. This was the Diprotodon, a large megafauna herbivore, Diprotodon optatatum. We also found fragments of eggshell from an extinct megapode, a giant flightless bird. We found it around 44,000 years ago, this fragment of juvenile Diprotodon, part of the radius bone. We looked carefully for the evidence of stone tool marks, as a result perhaps of butchering, but we found no obvious signs on this bone. We also found no signs of animal teeth gnawing on the bone, which may have suggested that the bone was not likely to have been brought into the shelter by an animal scavenger. The fact that this bone is in these ancient deposits with stone artefacts and other bone material shows that people and not other animals are likely to have brought the diprotodon bone into Warratyi. We also have the earliest known use of ochre in Australia and Southeast Asia, dating between 49 and 45,000 years ago, and evidence that people were using white gypsum pigment dated between 40 to 33,000 years ago. The red ochre residues were found on a stone tool using high-powered microscopes and the latest technique in residue analysis. We also found evidence of bone tools dated between 40 and 38,000 years ago. That's 10,000 years earlier than previously known. This bone point was probably made from the fibula or shin bone of a yellow-footed rock wallaby. It was used to pierce the skin of animals such as kangaroo or wallaby, and was used like an awl or needle tool, particularly when people were making kangaroo skin bags to carry water. Also, using residue analysis, we also found evidence of hafted tools, people putting flakes on the end of wooden sticks, 38 to 35,000 years ago. That's 10,000 years earlier than previously known. And we also found evidence of modern back tools dated between 30 and 24,000 years ago. Again, that's another 10,000 years earlier than we previously known. So what this discovery shows is that these cultural and technological discoveries show a much earlier development in cultural innovation in Australia than previously thought. They challenge the notion that the Aboriginal toolkit was unchanging and lacked early technological improvements. They also provide evidence that Aboriginal people were engaged in ceremonial activities very soon after they initially entered the continent, just before 50,000 years ago.